Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanya and You Chapter 31, Part 2. Chapter 31 is a powerful chapter. You could say one of my favorite chapters. Some really, really powerful ideas in Chapter 31, talking about spiritual health. Now, to be true, so we just come from Rosh Hashanah now, and we are heading to Yom Kippur tomorrow night. So, to tell you the truth, I spoke on the second day. I gave the sermon here at Chabad Center in Menary on the second day of Rosh Hashanah on Friday. And the inspiration of my talk was basically this class, this Thursday morning tiny class. That's almost a year since we started. And what I found over the year of me teaching Tanya, this is the first time that I've been seriously teaching Tanya. We have studied the Tanya and I've studied with other people, but to give a class, a weekly class on the Tanya, from the beginning, this is the first time I've done it. I've done some chapters here and there, and I'll tell you the truth that although I have been studying Tanya all my life, from I think we started when I was in the eighth grade, elementary school, but I gained a much deeper appreciation for the Tanya over this last year. And I think part of it is because, when you study the Tanya could be, unfortunately, could be a little bit of a closed book for many, because some of the ideas of the Tanya a little foreign to people, a little esoteric. Um, and also, even if we do study Tanya, very often I found with myself that the focus on the study, the focus was more on the academia of it, to understand what the Tanya is saying, and less focus on the application, the relevance to my life. But this time around, going, studying Tanya together with you, I try to focus heavily on the application. What is the message of this chapter to me today? So we do sometimes speak a little bit, philosophical and some ideas, but really the focus, the emphasis is always, what does this mean to me? What guidance can I get from this chapter of the Tanya? And ultimately, that is really what the Tanya was written for. It was written as a guide to life. It wasn't written as a book to understand godliness, to understand the universe, and to understand the Torah, and to understand our relationship with God. Yes, it's all in there. But the point of the Tanya was, people were coming to the Alter Rebbe, to the altar of the Tanya, and they were complaining about life. They were saying Torah and mitzvot, living a life true to God, isn't easy. I struggle with it. I feel like I'm a failure. The Torah says, Moses tells the Jewish people before he passes away, that serving God is close to you, it's attainable, it's easy, it's simple. And seemingly it's not. So the Alter Rebbe wrote a guide for them, the Tanya. And that's what it is. It's a guide to life. So the focus has to be, how is this guiding my life? So I spoke on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and I spoke about the Tanya. And what I told people is that if you haven't tried it, if you haven't studied Tanya, you should study it. But if you did study Tanya before, I encourage you to rediscover the Tanya and approach it with different glasses, with a different approach, with a different perspective. And I encourage them to find the classes or a translation of the Tanya that also weigh heavily on this aspect of the Tanya, of the application of the Tanya, because there are many translations of the Tanya. You go online, you go to a bookstore, there's many different translations, and many of them, if not most of them, focus on the understanding Tanya. the academic aspect of the Tanya, to understand what the Alter Rebbe meant, which is beautiful and important. But I think it's important, even more important, to focus the Tanya study on the application of the Tanya. So, if you remember when we started, the book that I recommended that we use was Rabbi Chaim Miller's translation, Practical Tanya, the Green Book, and that's what we've been using for the most part. And it's a good book. It's a good book because, again, it really focuses on application. But at the same time, it is a little bit heavy, meaning it's long and it's very academic, I should say. Recently, I came across another translation, and you can sign up online. It's called Tanya in Plain English. Tanya in Plain English. And that's exactly what it is. It's a very easy translation that flows well. It's in plain English, and it really talks to you. And it's not all out yet, but they're just starting to put out chapter by chapter. So if you want to do a nice review from the beginning, you can sign up on Chabad.org for Tanya in Plain English. I think it's a weekly edition that's going to come out where you can get straight into your email box a translation of, I'm not sure if it's a chapter at a time, half a chapter at a time, however they do it. But it's a good friend of mine actually who's behind this project, and I highly recommend it because again, it's focusing the Tanya on understanding what it is, what it's saying, but also how it applies to our daily lives. Okay, chapter 31. Good to see you all. Hope you're getting ready for Yom Kippur. Hi, Susan and Tom and Dan and Lynn and those following us on Facebook. Yom Kippur is just what is it? Less than 36 hours away. Less than 36 hours away. We'll be standing in shul or wherever we are. The day of Yom Kippur. It's a special day, a special time to prepare. But what better way to prepare for Yom Kippur than studying a chapter of Tanya? So, chapter 31, we spoke about this last time, and just to kind of, it's a long chapter. So, to continue where we left off, we talk about this idea where a person feels that they are inadequate, they are missing, they are failing spiritually. They feel far. They feel distant from God. They feel a void. And the Tanya says, and this was like we said, like the plot twist was that even feeling distant from Hashem should only bring a person to greater joy, because knowing how far you are and thinking, having compassion over your neshama, you're only going to be even more joyous and more happy when you're able to do another mitzvah, to speak to your neshama. Hold the neshama, hold your godly soul by the hand and say, I remembered you. I haven't forgotten about you. Right? We spoke about physical pleasures. A person generally, human beings, we are into physical things because that's what just talks to us, right? So it's eating and drinking and sleeping and everything in between. And sometimes we look at ourselves and say, is this all what life is about? All I care about is what's going to be for my next meal? How good is it going to be? What's my next vacation? How comfortable is my mattress? How smooth is my car? How beautiful are my clothes? Is that all what I'm thinking about? Physical pleasures, they come and go. They're so shallow. But when we talk about spiritual health, what is the pleasure of the soul? Lighting Shabbat candles, doing a mitzvah, putting on tefillin, saying a prayer, studying some Torah, kissing your mezuzah, hearing shofar, shaking the lulav, right? That is spiritual health. And spiritual health is true health, and it is eternal health. And that is the most satisfying. Ultimately, that is the most satisfying. So I heard a story a week ago, but as usual, I can never remember where I told my stories. Did I tell the story over here about the guy that took 50 years to be asked if he's Jewish? Wasn't on this platform? Okay. If it was, I apologize. Where did I say it? I don't even remember. Oh, yeah, the Parsha class. So the story is, I heard this from my friend Hillel, who is in Pletzel in Paris, France. Did I say it here? Did I ring a bell? No. Okay. We'll go ahead with it. So I have a good friend, Hillel Pekarski, who we're good friends from when we were young boys. We were in yeshiva together, and he is a bundle of energy. I mean, if you ever seen energy, he's just full of it, just full of energy. And what he does with his life now, he married a girl from France, from Paris. He moved to Paris, and he stands in the Pletzel. I think it's a neighborhood, like an old Jewish neighborhood in Paris. There's like a kosher restaurant. There's some synagogues. It's like an old Jewish neighborhood, and there are many tourists, especially Jewish tourists, that come to the Pletzel. And he stands there every day, and he offers Jews the opportunity to do a mitzvah, either put on tefillin, to light Shabbat candles, whatever. It's a holiday to do a mitzvah, and he's there. And every day he helps tens, or if not hundreds, of people to do a mitzvah of tefillin or other mitzvahs. And he's energetic, so he doesn't stop. He goes over, excuse me, sir, you do it. Excuse me, sir, you do it. You want to do a mitzvah all day long, all day long. Definitely unique and very different. So last week I was in New York, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and I met him in New York. He was visiting as well. He told me this story. He says not too long before, he was not too long before, he was in the Pletzel, and he asks someone, excuse me, sir, are you Jewish? And the guy responds, yes, I'm Jewish. Wow. He outdid his own energy. Wow. Excuse me, would you like to put on tefillin and say a prayer together? Sure, let's do it. So excited. So they put on tefillin together, they say the Shema, and then Hillel has to ask, he says, tell me, what's the excitement all about? I'm a very excited person, but I never met someone even more excited than I am to say that they're Jewish. So he says, let me tell you something. This goes back to 1974. Now, 1974 in New York, in Manhattan, was the height of the Rebbe's mitzvah campaign. They would rent these big RVs and park them at the corners of corner streets in Manhattan. They would blast loud Jewish music, and they would stop some of the people walking by and offer them an opportunity to come into the RV to do a mitzvah. So he says it was 1974. I was walking, doing the Manhattan walk. Wasn't looking right, wasn't looking left, just walking straight with them, holding my briefcase. And these two young yeshiva boys come over to me and say, "Excuse me, sir, are you Jewish?" Well, I was caught by surprise by that question. I was never asked publicly in the streets of Manhattan, "Am I Jewish?" So I replied, "No, I'm not Jewish," and I continued walking. I got home and I started thinking to myself, "Why? Why did I just say that? Why couldn't I just say I'm Jewish? What do they want from me? Why did they ask me that question?" And I started feeling terribly sorry for myself. Why would I say that? Why would I say that I'm not Jewish? I have to find them. I have to go back. So the next day, he's back at that same street, but these yeshiva boys are nowhere to be found. And every day he would try searching for them. He couldn't find them. And he says, "You could ask my wife. I was broken." And as time went on, it just became more and more sad. I was so broken. Why didn't I say that I am Jewish? He said, I've put on tefillin many times since then, but I was always waiting for the opportunity to rectify this, to be able to announce publicly, yes, I am Jewish. He says, 1974, 2024. It took 50 years. It's 50 years later. And now, publicly on the streets of Paris, I'm being asked, am I Jewish? Of course, I'm shouting out, yes, I'm Jewish. That all that stress that was that was within me for all these 50 years, finally it's all coming out. Of course, I'm excited to say I'm Jewish and put on tefillin. That's the story. And that's the story what the Tanya is telling us over here. And that is that when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we realize that yes, I am far, but I also have a neshama. And my neshama needs some energy, needs some food. We have to feed the neshama. We have to give it some attention. And when we do that mitzvah, we're talking to our neshama. That's who we're talking to. So the Tanya asks a simple question. The question is, and this is a question that perhaps anyone who's on a spiritual journey may have this question from time to time. And the question is, who am I fooling? Am I being honest with myself? I know who I am. I know that I am distant from Hashem. I know that I have thoughts that maybe are inappropriate. I know that sometimes I do things that are very distant from God, things that I'm not proud of. That's who I am. And until I fully transform myself, I should also be doing a mitzvah. I should also be doing, godly acts when seemingly it seems like I'm a fraud. I'm not being honest. This is not who I am. Today I'm in synagogue, and tomorrow you don't want to know where I am. Because it's just two total extremes in my life. Growing up, I wasn't involved. I didn't have before social media, and even in my earlier adult life, I wasn't tuned in to social media. And one of the good things about that is that I don't have to know everything that's going on in your life. But as soon as I tuned in to social media, and it's a great tool, it's a tool that you can spread a lot of good things with social media. But what comes with it is now you know what people are doing outside of synagogue. I would love to see people when they're in my, 4 cubits, as they say. When you come into a Chabad center, people are very Jewish. People are eating kosher. People are dressed appropriately. People are speaking properly. People are acting very Jewish, and that's the way I like to see people acting Jewish. But when I look at their life on Facebook, I see that there's a whole another life behind them, right? Sometimes people are intermarried and they're celebrating some other cultures and other religions. Sometimes people who are whatever living life outside of their Jewish little circle. So people may say, listen, I got to be honest with myself. This is who I am. Yes, every once in a while I'll come to a class, I'll come to a synagogue, I'll do a little prayer, but that's not who I am. I have a whole life out there that is distant from God. So they may ask themselves, who am I fooling? Not only who am I fooling, am I being honest? Am I being honest? There was this chassid of one of the Chabad Rebbe's, Rebbe Maharash, and living in Russia, he used to dress like the Hasidic garb, with the hat and with the long coat and the white shirt, right? That's what they used to dress. But he was also involved in business, and he used to travel a lot. And when he used to travel and go in business, At a certain point, he didn't feel so comfortable with his Hasidic garb. He felt he had to fit in, he had to dress a little differently. And so he took off his long black coat and he put on a short jacket, which at the time was considered more modern. And you're gonna fit in the business world. And he changed his Hasidic cap to a more modern Russian cap to fit in. And when he would travel, he would dress more modern. And when we would come back to his Rebbe, he would put back on his old Hasidic garb. And he was doing this for a while. But then he started asking himself, who am I fooling? Who am I fooling? And so the next time he came to his Rebbe, he didn't put his Hasidic garb back on. He kept his more modern attire. He felt, this is who I am. I've changed, and I want to be honest. I don't want to be fooling anyone. And he walked into his Rebbe for his private audience, as he would do every year. And his Rebbe turned to him and says, listen, we'll call him Beryl. Beryl. I thought that when you put on your modern dress, you are fooling them. And now I see that when you were putting on your Hasidic garb, you were fooling us. Who is the true self? Who is fooling who? What the Tanya says, these are powerful words of the Tanya. You're not a fraud. Yes, there are two sides to you, and that's okay. You have a godly side, you have your animalistic side. Yes, perhaps one day you'll be fully transformed. But until that point, it's okay to have these two sides. But what you have to do is you have to make that choice. And that choice has to be up here. In your mind, you have to realize who is the true you and who is the you that you're falling prey to. And that's okay, because we're human beings and we have weaknesses and we're not always going to be on top. And if we wait until we are fully transformed, it's not going to happen, or it'll take too long. But even while you have these seemingly two opposite lives pulling at you, as long as you know who is the true you, would the true you please stand up? Know who you are. If you have that identity confidence, then okay. So you have to so every once in a while you give in to pressure and you put on the modern garb. You put on the modern attire. You want to fit in. You give in to areas where you think, you know what, this is not really what I should be doing, but I'm doing it anyways. It's a moment of weakness. But you know that this isn't the true you. The words of the Tanya here are so powerful. The Tanya says that although there are these two selves pulling at you, the true you, the neshama, the godly soul should be so precious in your eyes that to make it happy, to rejoice with your neshama when you do a mitzvah, that should be more precious in your eyes than the times that you are feeding and entertaining your animal self. That's okay. You may have to entertain it, and more than you want, but that shouldn't be as precious in your eyes that when you do a mitzvah and you entertain, you feed, you are investing, you are celebrating your soul. That should be what you really appreciate. We have a choice. We have a limited attention span. Your attention should be to your neshama. You have to tell your animal soul, okay, I'm sorry, I'm busy now. Every once in a while. Just know who your true self is. Don't let it drag you down. Don't let the animal soul drag you down. You even an example, you get dressed up for your child wedding. Your son's getting married. Oh, you've been waiting for this for all your life. Parents, we know there isn't something There isn't a greater joy than the joy of a parent at their child's wedding. Ah, beautiful. We are rejoicing over this world. You have the most beautiful dress, beautiful suit, beautiful gown, and right at the beginning of the wedding, you're taking pictures. Everyone is fresh. Everyone looks nice. Everyone looks sharp. And then suddenly, you walk by this hallway in the hotel room in the hall that says wet paint, and you say, "Oi, I missed the sign." And you look at your dress; it has some paint, a little spot of light blue paint on your pink dress, yellow paint on your tuxedo. You're about to start the wedding. You don't have time now to go and change. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You have two choices. Either you could allow this to get the better of you and ruin your whole wedding. The wedding you've been waiting for 50 years, maybe 40 years, 30 years. And the whole wedding, like, if I'll look at my dress, what are people going to say? How is it? Whose fault it is? You're in a terrible mood. Okay, rightfully so, perhaps. Maybe they should have, don't paint your walls the night of a wedding. That's one choice. And that's obviously your animalistic soul. It's yourself. It's selfish. It's difficult, but it's selfish. I mean, in other words, I'm giving in to something which I know I shouldn't be giving in. Or do you allow your inner self say, you know what, get a hold of yourself. You'll make it work. You'll figure it out. You'll stand a little on the side for the pictures. You'll explain it to people. What's the big deal? As long as you're present and you're happy, that's the main thing. So you have a choice to make. Not to say, you know what, I'm so above it, it doesn't bother me. That's great. If you're at that point, kudos to you. But many of us, perhaps it will bother us. But it could bother us, but it shouldn't get the better of us. We should be able to make the choice and say, there's something more important. My attention right now has to be at something more important. That's what the Tanya says. Yes, we do have these weaknesses. We are not perfect, but don't allow it to take control over us. And if it does, next time we'll do better. That itself, the feeling that I failed, shouldn't either take control over us. It shouldn't disturb us. And in the words of the Tanya, we use the terminology, the Exodus phenomenon. The Exodus phenomenon. What's the Exodus phenomenon? The Jewish people left Egypt, the Exodus of Egypt. But interestingly, the language that the Torah uses about the Jewish people describing their Exodus, their leaving Egypt. The language that the Torah uses is that they ran away, they escaped. Ki barach ha'am, they ran away, they ran out of Egypt. And the Tanya asks, wait, they ran out of Egypt? I mean, do you know the story? They were totally wiped out. They were totally destroyed after all the 10 plagues, and then finally the last plague. I mean, they couldn't even fight back. They were telling the Jewish people, just go, right? Just leave. So why do we use the terminology that they ran away, they ran out, they escaped? And the Tanya says, we're talking about on the spiritual level. The Jewish people, they left Egypt, but unfortunately at that point, Egypt hasn't left them. The Egyptian mentality has not left them. They were still very closed in. They weren't pure. They were very sunken into the realms of impurity. It took 7 weeks till they received the Torah on Mount Sinai. 7 weeks of internal and inner work and transformation to finally be ready to receive the Torah. But at that point, they were so integrated with the Egyptian culture. You can imagine that. Moses came to the Jewish people and says, hey, we're leaving tomorrow. And they said, wait, tomorrow? We're not ready. We're so dirty. We feel so distant from Hashem. We should just leave and serve God in the desert. They weren't there. And therefore, on a spiritual level, they had to run away. In other words, they still had the Egyptian impurity within them, and they had to just say, I'm running away anyways. And we use this analogy to describe ourselves as well, right? Someone may say, I'm not going to do a mitzvah until I'm ready, until I feel spiritually ready and fit for this mitzvah. Will that ever happen? Perhaps. How long will it take? Perhaps many, many years. I should be spiritually ready for a mitzvah. Feel that I am connected with God in this such a deep way. Now I can do a mitzvah. It can take forever. So the Tanya says, learn from the exodus of Egypt. Run away. Run away from that self and run into the true self. You could say, I'm not ready yet, but I'll do it anyways. I'll do that mitzvah. I'll overcome that ego, that feeling of animalistic self, and do what's right, even if I don't feel up to it. That's called running away from Egypt. And eventually, you'll transform yourself. It will help you transform yourself. But that's the main thing. You don't always have to fight with yourself. Just know what the true self is and feed it, invest in it. Ignore the rest. Ignore it. Don't say, I'm going to transform it. Maybe one day you'll reach there. For now, just invest in your true self. Just want to conclude. I know we're a few minutes over. The little story with the professor, Velvel Green, who was a NASA scientist, professor at the time in Minnesota. And he had a relationship with Rabbi Moshe Feller. Later became fully religious, and he moved to Beersheba, to the southern Israel. But he was a very very wise and philosophical person. And when he started his relationship with the Rabbi Feller, he started off with a lot of questions on Judaism. He's a very secular man, but not just secular because of apathy to Judaism, but he really had questions. He had real theological questions on Judaism. And so he would have these discussions with Rabbi Feller. And at one point, Rabbi Feller told him, you know what? I think these are questions that you may want to ask the Rebbe. These are deep, important questions. Why don't you pen a letter to the Rebbe? And that's what he did. He wrote a long letter with, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 questions that he has on Judaism, on God. Is there a God? How do we know there's a God? Why does God want us to do a mitzvah? Is there a one God? Evolution, the age of the world? All these deep theological questions he posed to the Rebbe in a letter, amongst other more personal questions that he had as well. He got a response from the Rebbe. The response was answering some of his personal questions, and there was zero. The Rebbe totally ignored all his other questions. And he was a little bit taken aback by that. And he thought, deep in his heart, he thought, maybe the Rebbe doesn't have a good answer. Maybe these are good questions. I have good questions on Judaism that has no good answer. So he left it at that. His relationship with Rabbi Feller and with Judaism grew. And he started getting more involved. You know how it works. Once you have one experience with Judaism, you want to have another experience with Judaism. And eventually, after a few years, he became a fully invested Jew. He was a fully observant Jew, a Jew truly following the life of Torah. It was a number of years later, when he was fully a religious Jew, he suddenly gets a letter from the Rebbe. And in the letter, is a response to all of his questions in his first letter that he wrote to the Rebbe. One by one by one, the Rebbe beautifully lays it all out and explains all these questions. To print a letter in English, very nice letter. And he realized something. He realized that at the time, if the Rebbe would have answered his questions, it wouldn't have been an answer. He would have just re-asked the questions. He would have argued with it. And there's no end to intellectual arguments. But now that he accepted Judaism, now he sees things differently. So now he appreciates all of these answers. And I'm telling this story now because I think this is on a more of an intellectual level, but it's on an emotional level as well. Emotionally, we are also sometimes torn, and we are invested in other areas which are not good. Whether we have an anger management problem, or whether we have an indulgent problem, or we have laziness problem, we have any other issue that we have emotionally. Or it could be a religious problem. We'd like to be involved in areas that we shouldn't be involved in. And sometimes we say, you know what? Let me have all the answers. I want to fully change myself before I could continue my growth in my journey towards God. And the Tanya says, don't do that. It's never going to work. If you wrestle with someone who is soiled, someone who is dirty, you're just going to get dirty yourself. Put it aside. Just put it on the side. You just focus on doing good. Focus on doing good, and then you can come back to it. You can come back to it later. But if you focus on who you truly are, your true self, you're not running away from yourself. You're running to yourself. You're running into yourself. Then, eventually, your other self, your animalistic self as well, will come along on the journey. Because it's a good journey. Who doesn't want to have a good journey? So that's a wrap on chapter 31. Read it again inside. It's a powerful, powerful chapter. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you. You shall all have an easy fast, Yom Kippur. And we'll see you next time. Just for a quick note about next time. So next week and 2 weeks are both holidays, right? Next week is the first day of Sukkot. And the following Thursday is going to be the first days of the second days of Sukkot of Shmini Atzeres. So next 2 Thursdays, we're not going to have class. And I don't see why not. We can't do class in 3 weeks' time. So next 2 Thursdays, no Tanya class. And in regards to